Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. This week's video is all about the making, the designing, the process of Aphrodite. She took quite a while to make. I think really she's best described as a sampler quilt with a face in the middle on a checkered background. But she's so much more than that. Let me explain. In recent weeks, I set myself the goal of using up material from my stash. I'm quite happy to go and buy some more material if I need it to complete a quilt, but I thought to use some of these beautiful smaller pieces that I had, I would start with those in the quilt and then build around them. So I just finished the late summer quilt, and that was using all fabric from my stash. And then I had a message in my Etsy shop from somebody who asked if I would make another face quilt. Well, I'd made a face quilt in 2023, and that was part of a series of 7 quilts for the days of the week. So the face quilt in that series was for Monday's Child is Fairer Face. And so I thought, oh, that would be a good way of using up small pieces of fabric in individual blocks like a sampler quilt. And so I messaged her back and I said, what did you have in mind? I don't really like to replicate previous quilts that I've made, so it wouldn't be identical, but I could make a face quilt. And she said, I just want a really bright quilt with a face on, with a checkered black and white background. And so I thought, yes, okay, I shall do that. And so before I designed the face for this quilt, I just used up all the bits and bobs of fabric that I had left over from the late summer quilt. So I made little individual blocks. I knew that most of my blocks will work around a 3-inch square. So it could be smaller pieces that make up a 3-inch square, or there could be 3-inch squares that make a larger block. So my first step was to go along and use all those little bits of leftover fabric, and I made some lovely little blocks, and I'll show you those. And those are the small blocks that I made last night. And then I thought I'd better design a face. It's no use making lots and lots of blocks if I don't know what to do with them. So I worked out my first face image. So I was quite happy just making lovely little blocks. So I made the pink and blue one. And then I thought before I start, I need to have a good look at the design for this face, just to make sure everything's in the right place. And I decided that I would move the star that fell just below her eye. And the beauty of working on this graph paper is, even though I've finished quite a complex design, I don't have to scrap the whole thing. I can just cut and paste in real times, cut and paste in with glue and scissors, a piece of graph paper over the area that I want to change, let that dry, and then reinstate the new design. So I did that. So what I'm going to do now is move this little star that falls below her eye. At the moment, everything is all in one line, and I think it would look much better if I was to move that star across. So I've added this blank piece over the design, and now I'll reinstate that slightly to the right. So at that point, I'd made those lovely little blocks. I was happy with the face now. I'd made one pink and blue block that sort of sat just above the forehead, the middle of the forehead, and then I decided that I would start working on her facial features. I think what I need to do before I do very much more is to get some perspective of size. So I think I might make a nose. And to get the shape of the nose, I've taken 3-inch squares, I've sewn around the outside, cut the corners, and now I'm just going to turn those into half square triangles. So I've got all of these little half square triangles. The purple here, they form the nostrils, and then the pink with the blue floral on is the nose. and then we start working on the eyes. So I'm going to have a go at doing the eyebrows first. Well, I've put the eyebrows together, and now I think I might just do a little bit of unpicking and add some eyelashes. So what I'm going to do is to unpick these 4 seams, and then I will cut some of the fabric off here, add some eyelashes and put it back together again. So at that point I was quite happy with those fluttery eyelashes. I thought it had a little bit of detail, and so I moved on to making the eyes. I'm going to make up these eyes, but I only have these 2 bees. I've fussy cut them. It's all going to be 1 3/4 inch squares. So I've sewn those pieces all together, and I think I'm just going to add a little bit of shape to each eye, so it'll come down like that. Well, I like the eyes, but as you can see, there's a little bit of an issue with the eyelashes. So the eyelashes weren't a great success first time round, so I unpicked those, and I've learnt that if I'm not happy with something, just unpick it. Don't waste time thinking about whether I should or shouldn't. I just unpicked it, and I was much happier with the way they looked afterwards. And that's what I've gone for. So I've moved the eyelashes over a little bit away from the centre and took them out to the eyebrows. And so she had her nose and she had her eyes, and I was quite happy with those. I was putting off the mouth. Couldn't decide which fabric to use for a mouth, so I kept postponing that. But I started making blocks to go around the top of her head, and it was loads and loads of fun just grabbing bits of fabric from here, there and everywhere but my room. I'm lucky enough to have a designated space to sew in, and I am really grateful for that. It wasn't always the case, so I am thankful to have this space. However, it's not very big, and it can get really untidy really quickly, and I can't work in a mess. This is my workspace, and this is my workspace, and that's my workspace, more workspace, and that's my design wall, and that's the floor area where I'm working. So I just had to stop the fun and tidy up. Once everything was tidy again, I could see things a little bit clearer. So that's much tidier now. My space is clear, my mind is clear, and now I've decided on another alteration. So where those half square triangles in the yellow touch in sort of an hourglass shape, there's a beautiful piece of gold and blue fabric, but it's not working with the other blue. When I put these 2 together, I thought there would be enough contrast, but there isn't. So I'm going to take that beautiful blue and gold and purple out and use that elsewhere. Like I say, I don't mind unpicking. I'm quite an expert really. I'm not sure if the camera is picking up the difference, but I think it works much better now. So I don't have a deadline for the making of this quilt, so I can take my time and reflect on different aspects of it. And so I made that alteration, and I felt much happier about that. And so then I moved my attention over to the large block on the left hand side of the top of the quilt. So another one that is quite impactful, and I wanted to try and make the colours talk to one another. The way I've worked it is to have, if there was blue in the centre, then I'd have sort of triangles of colour dotted around. The same with orange, the same with yellow. So you're sort of always looking circular connections around the face. So I selected these lovely colours, again with a feature bird in the centre. Some of the designs I've changed so that I can incorporate a bird or a butterfly or a beetle. And so everything was coming together quite quickly really at this point, and I was just having fun. And then I realised that I was running out of the black fabric. I was absolutely convinced I had a stash in the cupboard, but I couldn't find it anywhere. And then I realised that I'd made a project liners quilt and used quite a lot of it up. And so I should have enough just to finish that top left hand corner today. Well, I've sewn together all of those pieces now for that top strip, and it measures 63 inches wide. And now I think it's time I tackled the face. Well, I was just about to start working on the eyes and I've had another change of plan. So if you look at the right eye, you can see that in that star there are two different sorts of fabric. There's a red background and a teal background. Well, the floral design on the front is quite similar and they don't stand out enough against each other, and I didn't think they really stood out on her face as much as I wanted them to, and so I altered that. Well, I replaced that variable star with this beautiful peacock on a teal background. I think it stands out a little bit more. And there was also the opportunity then to incorporate another bird on her face, so I was happy with that. So then I decided to move on, work on her eyes. So I'd been looking at them for quite a while and I decided that I would put lower lashes on to match the upper lashes. I hadn't really intended to do that, but I just thought it would look nicer, and so that's what I did next. And that's what the eyelashes look like now that they're finished. And some of that red that was in that original star, you can just see there is a friendship star. So whenever I remove a block or alter a block, I try and save the fabric. It's lovely fabric. I don't want to throw it away. And so I used that in the little friendship star below. So I shall build out on the right as far as I can until the black arrives. And there was a big block to the right of that little variable star with the peacock in on her face. So it was this big block here. So I decided to work on that one next. And again, the unpicker helped me out. So I selected the fabric that I thought would look nice there. I wanted to incorporate some orange on that part of the quilt. And so I built the block up and sewed it up and then unpicked it and sewed it up again. So it was that little pinwheel in the centre. Originally it was grey and orange and I didn't think that stood out enough, and so I changed that to pink and grey, and I think that works much better. And then below that big block and to the right there is another variable star, and then I decided that I wanted to bring in some yellow. So I made this lovely little block. And thankfully there was no unpicking on that block, and then I decided that I would tackle the mouth, and I just had a parcel arrive with this Robert Kaufman fabric in, and I decided that's the fabric that will make her mouth, and so quite sumptuous. I changed that design as well, her mouth. I'll show you that. She looks a little bit pouty, doesn't she? Very. Is it seductive? I'm not sure. That's why I chose Aphrodite as her name, because of those luscious lips. So once I made those lips, I was happy then to carry on making blocks. So I worked on this orange here, the on-point square, and this block here. And in this block, I decided to use some more lighter colours and some oranges and reds and greens. There's all sorts in this lovely modern fabric. And beetles. More beetles. Can you have enough beetles in a quilt? I don't think so. And once I'd finished below here, I decided that I would tackle this big block here. So I thought I would do that one next, tie in some of the colours from around the quilt, and then I'd know how to fill in the smaller blocks and what colours to choose there. So this is the design of the block, and this is the fabric that I chose. So it's a lovely block, and from a distance it's the yellow that really stands out. But when you're closer, it's got some really lovely pretty butterflies in, and they look really lovely too. So this is where I've got to so far. I think she's looking very beautiful. And I've sewn the face part where the eyes are together. The top strip where the checkerboard is, that's all complete. That's one band now. And I've got sections in blocks. There's chunks of designs going together because there's a lot of this bottom part of the quilt that I haven't designed yet, because it's a sort of improv sampler, I suppose. So I think I'm just going to work now below her lips, finish off where the on point red square is, go to the bottom part there and to the right, finish off that bottom right corner, and then I can sew all that together in a block. So it's all well and good, isn't it? Just having fun, making all these blocks. But there does come a point when I think to myself, well, I'm going to have to put all this together somehow. And I've sort of reached that point now. So I decided that some of these smaller blocks that fit between the larger blocks, that I could construct them in such a way that I could make larger blocks that fit together. So the top was one panel and the face, parts of that were all in one piece, and so I decided now that I needed some sort of structure to the construction of the blocks. So I decided to work below her mouth and to the right hand side, and the first thing I did was to make a little pink block, and I'll show you that. And I added the checkerboard background to finish that corner, and I put in a few little squares within squares because I love that block and I thought that would just give a little bit of lightness and brightness. And I wanted to incorporate some of this beautiful bright green here below. Well, I've reached the point now where I'm starting to put the pieces together. So if you have a look at the orangey on point square just below the lips and work your way out to the right, there is a piece there that is the same width as the checkerboard below with the green pinwheel on. So I'm going to join the orange on point and the green pinwheel together. So that will be one piece, and then I'll be able to join the pink corner to that, and that will be one block. And because the whole design of this quilt is made up with 3-inch squares, it's quite easy to nest these seams and get lovely matching points and corners to these blocks. So you're not travelling long distances to join up. It's only small amounts all the time. Every 3 inches you have another seam to match. And now I've joined together that bottom right hand corner, and so I'm just going to add the lips to that. So I've joined those two pieces together on the bottom. That's all one piece now. So I'm going to join the nose and the eyes to the pink on the right. And so that will be one piece. And now I'm going to take that panel where the lips are and add to that on the left hand side that yellow on point square. So that will be one panel then, and I can join that to the panel where the nose and the eyes are, and then I'll just have the left hand side to put together. And so from here now all the way down to the very bottom and to the right hand side, all of this area was one big panel. So now I had one on the top and all of this piece, they were all joined together. And so then I started working in the bottom left hand corner. Again, there's another largish block there, so I did that one next. So you can see how that fits in that bottom left hand corner. And then if you look to the right of that, you can see there is a green pinwheel. There's a gap below that, and then there's some checkerboard. Well, in the gap below, I used some of those little squares that I made on the very first day. So I incorporated those into there and some small pinwheels. And then when I'd finished those little green patches, I moved my way to the left of that and I made a little 3x3 block, which I think looks really pretty too. So once I'd made that was the whole of the bottom of that strip complete. And so then I turned my attention up to her left ear. There was some work to do on her left ear, and that's when I've got that little variable star by her ear. Oh, I'll just move that. There you go. So you can just see there's that pink and yellow star. So her face is joined now, and I'm just going to work on that left hand side. So I want to bring some of those bright green pinwheels into that, and I'll have a look now and see what other colours I want to bring over there. So I thought I'd just have a tiny little touch of that orange, so I put some orange squares within black squares, and I made some little green and black pinwheels. And then in the bottom left of the quilt, I just thought I needed to bring in a little bit more of that bright pink, and so I made another little block to go in there. And so all that was left then to do was to join that left hand column, so from here down to the base, and then I could join across, and that was it. Suddenly the quilt was finished, and I'll show you what she looks like whole. So she's almost done now. It's taken quite a while. I have the batting, and the backing has just arrived. It's this Kafir set. It's monochrome onion rings, and it's a sateen, so it's lovely and soft, wide back. So I think that would look really modern and trendy on the back of this quilt. I might put a little thin black border just to finish that off, but I shall get on and quilt that now. But before I finish this video, I will add some little close-up shots of some of the lovely little bits of fabric that I've included in this quilt, because you can't see it all at once, and there's some lovely little bits there, lots of lovely detail. So if you are still with me, well done you. It's quite a long one this week. Thank you for your company, and I will see you next week, hopefully. Take really good care of yourselves. Bye.